Hello everybody, welcome to Bitcoin Not Crypto. You can find me on Twitter X at ForestTotal. And in today's video, I'm going to be talking about some news that just got released that Abu Dhabi's sovereign wealth fund just bought a bunch of Bitcoin ETFs. And also there's a new pension fund that also bought some Bitcoin as well. And I'm going to talk more broadly and more deeply about the idea of game theory playing out. And we're going to kind of try to explore that and explain that. But before we do, just a quick word from the sponsor. Remember, if you're enjoying this show, if you're enjoying what I produce here on YouTube, the best way to support this channel is to check out the sponsors. So do that, and we'll be right back to this video. Today's video is brought to you by my good friends at the Bitcoin Way, the team who specializes in helping you become fully self-sovereign. The team has over 25 years of cybersecurity experience and offer the premier white glove service to walk you through proper 100% self-custody of your Bitcoin. It's absolutely critical that you are taking full control of your wealth and avoiding all counterparty risk of sharing keys with a third party. The Bitcoin Way will walk you through step by step exactly how to secure your Bitcoin, run your own node, manage UTXOs, and even tackle inheritance planning. The best part? They don't KYC you and never know the size of your Bitcoin stack, so you can learn to protect your wealth with complete privacy. The team can also help you upgrade your personal cybersecurity, set up a privacy phone, or even establish a Plan B residency. So, if freedom is what you desire, head over to thebitcoinway.com/forest or click the link in the description below to schedule a free 30-minute consultation with the Bitcoin Way. Don't delay. Your generational wealth depends on it. And again, that's the bitcoinway.com/forest, or just click the link below. All right, so here we have the tweet. This is the Q1 report that Abu Dhabi's sovereign wealth fund has bought $436 million of Bitcoin ETFs in Q1. And this is their 13F right here from the SEC. What's funny about this is on Monday, MicroStrategy released that they bought $700+ million of Bitcoin. Now, another thing that's very interesting about this is that the sovereign wealth fund bought an ETF. They actually don't own Bitcoin. They have it custodied by an ETF issuer. And this is kind of something that's feels very strange because, you know, this is a foreign investor that is buying a US ETF, and you know, it just seems strange to me, but it's not completely out of the realm. There are a lot of other nations out there, or funds and all sorts of stuff, that end up having their assets in other, you know, countries. But with something like Bitcoin, it just makes a lot of sense to acquire it yourself, to become your own custodian. You can do that and you don't have to pay fees. And it just ends up being a lot more sovereign. You know, this is a sovereign wealth fund after all. So around the same time, this got announced as well. State of Wisconsin Investment Board discloses 321 million Bitcoin ETF holdings. So those two things combined equal the same amount of Bitcoin bought as MicroStrategy's buy this week. And this is for all of Q1. So both of these things are being released because of Q1 SEC filings, basically, that are coming out. So we can see this kind of stuff play out, which means that all of these buys were in the past. All of these buys have already happened before these announcements, like quite a significant amount of time before the announcements. Which means there's a lot of things that we were maybe not seeing, right? Maybe there are sovereign wealth funds out there. Maybe there are states, nation states out there that are buying actual Bitcoin, and they're doing it through a non-KYC wallet that isn't directly attached, or we don't know as the public is attached to the state or sovereign wealth fund. And that Bitcoin is being sent there. They're buying it OTC, they're buying it peer-to-peer. Maybe they have some deal with an exchange that keeps it semi-anonymous. And there could be all of this buying going on behind the scenes. Now, this would make a lot more sense because if, and even when this happened 2 hours ago, we saw Bitcoin go from 94,000 to 98,000, right? So this kind of news, this kind of is a signal And I saw another post that said this is the starting gun of nation-state adoption. This is a signal, though, that people are buying, that nations are buying, that these big players are buying, that it's becoming important for these people to acquire Bitcoin. It's becoming a strategic play to buy this Bitcoin. Now, again, with this state of Wisconsin, the investment board buying 321 million of Bitcoin ETFs, that seems like a big amount. That's actually 0.82% of what they could be buying, or of their investments. So, that's very small. I mean, what's going to happen when they realize that Bitcoin is the best asymmetrical bet they could make? What's going to happen when that 0.82% just increases in nominal terms, in fiat denominated terms, against their other assets, because it compounds and the growth rate of it is higher? So are they going to trim down? Is 0.82% their exact allocation that they want? Or maybe that's just a starter position for them. So to me, these kind of news events, this is a signal, again, a starting gun perhaps even for nation state adoption, for sovereign wealth adoption, for pension states. Nobody wants to get left behind. This is the idea that buying Bitcoin as an institution used to be a risk, and now it's becoming a risk not to buy Bitcoin. And it's that insurance policy, 2% allocation or 0.82% allocation is an insurance in case. At least they have something. At least they've gotten off zero. Now, I think this all begins to play into the idea of game theory. I'm going to try to summarize game theory a little bit off of some prompts and some information that I've gotten from ChatGPT. I recommend diving deeper into this, though. This will be sort of a surface level explaining all of the aspects that I can, and it's kind of on you to go deeper into this. There's you can basically follow any one of these threads that I'm going to touch on, though. So the origins of game theory, they were introduced basically all the way back in 1738 is the earliest case. And it's essentially the idea of behavior between players of a game, right? And we can even see it's gone all the way up to the Cold War, right? There's this idea of war games, and you have to decide, okay, well, your player, right? If there's the idea of mutually assured destruction, then nobody can play the game. It's not to anybody's benefit to make a move. But you can relate game theory to all sorts of different things. And economics is one of them. Government is one of them. Politics, this kind of stuff, and even Bitcoin, biology, right? All these different fields, you can explain or you can implement the idea of game theory. So here's some of the key concepts of game theory. So there's players within this game. So those are the decision makers, right? So you and I, right? If we participate in the game of the stock market or the game of investing, we are players in that game. So then you have certain amounts of choices within that game. So in the example of nuclear war, you have two decisions. You either press the button or you don't press the button, and you react to the other player that either presses the button or doesn't press the button, right? So you can cooperate, defect, invest, or not, right? These are kind of different choices that you might have depending on the game. Then there's going to be payoffs, so outcomes based on the player's strategies. One of these experiments that explained game theory really well was sort of the idea of an attack and retaliate type strategy. And it turns out that one of the best overall strategies was called tit for tat, which means that you don't attack your opponent, and you only retaliate if they attack you first. So this is the way to basically keep the peace and to defend yourself, and not to be an aggressor, not to be completely passive, but to retaliate only if necessary. So with that being the best play in a lot of game theory situations, you kind of begin, if you can relate that to Bitcoin, you understand that as soon as a nation state adopts Bitcoin, because of the properties of Bitcoin, it becomes advantageous for you to retaliate by also owning Bitcoin. So it's kind of this, well, you don't, as an individual, like if none of us adopted Bitcoin, we would all participate in game theory elsewhere in our investing. But because of Bitcoin's being a way to opt out of the current situation financially that we're in, we can now participate in this separate field. So if we understand what Bitcoin is its own monetary network. It is something outside of the control of any one central organization, whether that's a central bank or a government. And it allows people to transact what we have deemed as value over a ledger that is immutable. So we have absolute proof of an activity happening. And we have the ability to store that value cryptographically secure. So that's very valuable. That's incredibly valuable to be able to do that and to have that type of technology, which money is a technology. Bitcoin is, in my eyes, a perfected version of that technology for today's age. And what I see happening is as nations see this, they will begin to adopt it, and the other nations that haven't adopted it will see that a foreign adversary has adopted it and retaliate. The idea of game theory will play out where people have to either, accept it or not and deal with the consequences of doing that. So if we look at some past examples, we can see some different governments have adopted Bitcoin in different ways or not adopted it, right? So one thing that happened in 2021 was China banned Bitcoin mining and trading. And this forced a lot of miners to go elsewhere. And where they ended up going, they created more Bitcoin for the people around them, themselves, and the nation they were in, and more abundance, because Bitcoin mining is something that increases the value of the electricity that goes into it. And of course, Bitcoin trading just creates more people holding that asset. And if that asset goes up in value, that means that their wealth has increased compared to the nations that didn't have it or the people that didn't have it. So a lot of that mining went to Texas. A lot of it got tied in with the grid to help stabilize grids. They can be a buyer of electricity when there's too much electricity, depending on, windmills turning or, gas plants not wanting to shut down because it's inefficient to shut them down and reboot them when there's demand. So they can be that demand when there's no other demand, and they can turn off when there is other demand from people that need electricity. So with that, there was, companies that have become very profitable, miners, right, that are based out of the U.S. And that is spreading to the ecosystem around there. That's employing people. That there's tax dollars that go to the state government or the federal government. Actually, I don't think there's state tax in Texas, but anyway, there's so that it actually creates abundance within the places where those miners relocated. So because Bitcoin is global, China banning it really didn't affect it in the long run. There was this dip in hash rate, there was this dip in price, and it did affect it in the short term, but it all recovered and has since gone to new all-time highs, hash rate and price. So they excluded themselves from a certain period of time of onward adoption. And maybe they had some reason to do that because of their grid, and there were, clandestine miners in locations where it was too much of a strain on the grid. They didn't have relationships with the electricity producers, so they couldn't balance that well. And the other thing, of course, is Bitcoin is a way of being able to control your own capital, and you can transfer that capital elsewhere out of the country. So that's something, of course, that the Chinese government did not want. So there was reason for them to ban this. But what they did was they excluded themselves from the innovation that is Bitcoin for a period of time. Now, I think they're kind of trying to backdoor their way into it again. So we can look at a place that has rapidly adopted Bitcoin. El Salvador, right? At first, they made it legal tender. The government holds Bitcoin. They buy Bitcoin, and that Bitcoin has gone up in fiat-nominated value over time. They've created the infrastructure to mine Bitcoin, which itself is valuable. The Bitcoin adoption actually boosted a ton of foreign investment and tourism. It's increased the property values, basically increased the value of that entire country, so because they're an early adopter. Now, there's an interesting tweet here by Terrence Michael. El Salvador has 6,077 Bitcoin with 6 million people. Abu Dhabi has 4,599 Bitcoin with 3.9 million people. Even though Abu Dhabi has a much smaller population than El Salvador, they have caught up in terms of Bitcoin stack, in fact, surpassed. But Abu Dhabi owns their Bitcoin via BlackRock's IBIT ETF. El Salvador holds spot Bitcoin. So Abu Dhabi has really actually done something quite significant here. We have another comment here. From those numbers, El Salvador has approximately 0.001013 Bitcoin per person, and Abu Dhabi has approximately 0.001179 Bitcoin per person. Given Bhutan has over 11,000 Bitcoin and a population of only 794,637, Bhutan has approximately 0.01384 Bitcoins per person. So Bhutan is another nation that adopted Bitcoin, and they adopted it with their abundance of natural resources and electricity generation through hydro dams, where they actually didn't have an option of using that electricity. They couldn't sell it. They couldn't use it nationally. So miners came in and partnered with them and used that electricity to mine Bitcoin. And they've been able to acquire 11,000 Bitcoin, which is quite impressive. So you can see this small nation of Bhutan that doesn't even have 1 million people living in it. They've been able to acquire so much Bitcoin ahead of everybody else. And this has actually allowed them to have a lot more reserves of money, right? If Bhutan runs into some trouble, they could use some of this Bitcoin. They could sell it to alleviate whatever kind of stress is within their country. This gives them a lot of power, and this is something that they wouldn't have had Bitcoin not been invented. They wouldn't have that 11,000 Bitcoin that is worth so much money at this point. So as we can see with this idea of game theory and with this recent news of Abu Dhabi's sovereign wealth fund, we can see that Bitcoin is a winner, and that by not adopting Bitcoin, we can see with China's ban of Bitcoin, they've basically pushed out innovation. They've pushed out wealth creation within their own nation, and that wealth has been acquired by the US, by El Salvador, by early adopter nations who welcome that in and participate in the Bitcoin network in some way. We can also see that that Norway's sovereign wealth fund they actually have a significant position in MSTR. So they also have exposure to Bitcoin, but it's kind of 2 steps away, as IBIT is 1 step. We'll just kind of say it like that. So we can see that Abu Dhabi is the first to actually gain a more direct exposure possibly to Bitcoin. I mean, there might be others, again, that have already bought in Bitcoin, but we just don't know it yet because they don't have to disclose it, because it's not through a registered ETF like IBIT or a registered security like MSTR is. So we really don't know what's playing on behind the scenes. There's lots of rumors. There was lots of rumors in the last all-time high as well. So we really don't know what's going on here. But if you look at game theory, you can play this out, that it makes sense that these nations have seen already, there's been a trial run. And this happens on the corporate level as well with MSTR. You can see how well that company's done. They went from a $4 billion company to now like an $80 billion company. So it's just crazy to see, and that's game theory playing out. That's Bitcoin adoption. Metaplanet, the same. Semler, the same. Individuals that adopt Bitcoin, they outperform the other individuals that are working in the same field as them, and all of this, right? So it just makes sense that game theory is playing out. It's happening behind the scenes, not to drive the price up so that these people can acquire as much as possible. Because let's if you look at the holders of Bitcoin right now, it's almost 70% is held by individuals. So they want to acquire as much as they can and move that individual holding down and move the institutions, the governments, the states, the sovereign wealth funds. They want to move that up without affecting the price, because the less they affect the price, the more they can acquire. They're in their acquisition phase of Bitcoin. Eventually, they'll be in their kind of sitting in their wealth phase, but right now they're in their acquisition phase, and we can all do that as well as individuals. So we need to front run these guys. I mean, I hope that you already have been. I know I have been, and I plan to continue to, because I still think that there is time. I think that time is unfortunately running out. I think Bitcoin's price will find a new high and find a new floor very soon. And so I hope to acquire as much as I can in the meantime. And I'll be acquiring it no matter what, because it's a different monetary system that I believe is more fair and that I want to participate in, and I want to remove myself from the fiat monetary system that is not working for anyone except the people close to the money printer. So hopefully that explains it all. I want to go deeper on game theory, but maybe I'll bring in an expert to really kind of have a discussion about it, as opposed to just covering some of the basic things there. But yeah, so that'll happen in the future eventually. And I just wanted to thank everybody for watching. If you have any questions, comment them on YouTube, and we'll see you in the next video. Thanks, everyone.